Hi, I just want to do a video this week about, the idea of sources. Now, we talk about attribution and sources. Attribution is the idea of, whenever you have a story, you should always attribute it. You should say this was said by, you give the name and you give title or information that is important. So if the person's an official or has a position or a job that's relevant and why they're speaking, then you would say, said, Leslie Smith or Leslie Jones or, whatever, teacher in the school district, vice president of the business, whatever it is. And so you give the title, it connects, it tells why this person's being quoted. Now, in some cases, you might say it's a parent, you might say it's a community member, you might just say, if it's at Lincoln Land, you may say a freshman or a sophomore, you may give the age if that's somehow relevant, although we try not to overemphasize age. And so all those are things, like you do. So that's attribution. But as far as sources go, you should always give that information, the name and that information, because it gives people the opportunity to judge for themselves the value. So for example, if you say so-and-so and you just say citizen, you may value that differently than an official source. Or if you say a witness, that may be valued differently, so you give this information so that people can evaluate. The other thing is people who maybe are like, I don't know, that person said that, but that seems kind of I'm a little skeptical of it. They may, know the person in a small town, or they may Google the person and realize the person has a website. You want to have the information so they can judge the value. Because the case is if somebody comes out against something and ends up, they spent their entire career giving anti, whatever the cause is, messages. They're an environmentalist, or they're, they've only supported capitalism and big business ventures and things like that. Then, that makes a big difference in, how people are going to view and judge it. So you give them that information, which then leads to this question of sometimes people go, well, somebody didn't want to give me their name. Well, the problem with that is if somebody doesn't want to give you their name, then it probably means you don't need to use it. A couple of reasons is if you don't give the name, it deprives your readers the opportunity to vet and decide, how much credibility they give. It also, if they say something negative about somebody else, it allows somebody to take a shot at somebody and saying something negative, and then they don't have to answer for it. It's sort of like, if you can wear a mask and go around and, kind of in the internet age and, be a bully. Some people will be a bully if they have if they feel like they have a cloak of invisibility and they can go around and do whatever they want. But that's unfair to the people who are the victims of it. And you, by putting in a published journalistic work, are giving the people the opportunity to be a bully or to take advantage. And so you don't need to play that role in this. So you should always give them the chance to name it. Now, the case is the third reason I always say you want to name sources is essentially there's a few reasons. If you give somebody anonymity, you have to uphold that promise. As a journalist, we have an ethical obligation to uphold if we make a promise, we need to uphold it. And if we say, hey, I'm going to let you be anonymous, then you have to uphold that. Now, what happens is if suppose somebody says something that is libelous and they say, well, they're cheating and stealing over here, and I've got, and they tell you about how they're cheating and stealing, and they give you some information, and you go, wow, this is great, I'm going to use it, and you write your story and you publish it, and the person comes out and says, that's not true, and they sue. Now, what they're going to sue is they're going to say, okay, well, you didn't say it, you attributed it, but who is your source, or something like that. They want to know it. Government happens a lot. If you have used an unnamed source and you promise them anonymity, then you need to uphold that promise of anonymity. And a court may order you, in fact, to release the name. Now, the thing is as a journalist, your obligation is to do what you promised. And so you can tell the judge, you can say, I understand your request, but I made a promise as a journalist, I won't break my promise. And the judge, as a judge, has a right to put you in jail, and you don't have much protection from that. Now, they'll do that. They will be very reluctant to do it, but they will in times do that. And so you have to ask the question of, if they then say, okay, well, you're going to jail then, and you're going to sit in a cell until you give me the name, or the person agrees to let you give me the name, the question then becomes, is it worth it? And if the answer is, it was just a throwaway quote in a story, or I didn't really think it advanced anything, or it wasn't that much of public interest, the question is, are you willing to sit in jail for 30 days or 60 days for this information? Is this information? Now, there are things that are important enough that I would go to jail for 30, 60, 90, 100 days in order to bring light to something in the public view. But the fact that, McDonald's doesn't have good service on Tuesdays, no, I'm not willing to go to jail about that. I don't know why I'd be doing a story or giving anonymous sources for that. But the case is that's not something worth going to jail over. So I think that's kind of the question is this information in enough of the public interest to do it? Now, with that said, there are cases. The Watergate situation, they gave anonymity to a person named Deep Throat, a source. They called him Deep Throat, and that brought down the president of the United States. And in certain cases, that's probably worth it. There are people who have information about serious crimes and serious allegations against political figures that have serious reason to be scared, and the information they give you is worthwhile. Now, there's a couple things to keep in mind if you're going to give anonymity to somebody, and those are, anonymity doesn't extend to your editor. Your editor still should know who the source is and have an opportunity to question the source. Why? Because the editor should still have the right to question the source, and the reason is because they're making a decision that they're equally as responsible for. So anonymity, even in Watergate, Ben Bradley, the editor of the Washington Post, knew who Deep Throat was, but he made that same promise of anonymity to the source as well. And so you have to be willing to keep that anonymity for the person equally. The second thing is, you should know who the person is, and you should, let your editor know. But beyond that, you don't tell anybody ever. Now, there's a few different caveats, and anonymity, especially in politics, is oftentimes granted. Sometimes they also use other phrases. So there's a couple of phrases I want you to be familiar with. I probably would put this on a final exam or whatever. So this is kind of important things. There's different things. There's anonymity. Anonymity means that, an anonymous source is one in which you don't name the person. You say a person who wished to remain anonymous, and that's just no name, nothing, just anonymous. And that's granted kind of in the most limited of capacity. There's also what we call, we might also have anonymous in the sense of, like, if you might, with anonymous sources, you probably also want to corroborate it with a second source, possibly anonymous, or see some sort of document that supports that, because you're putting your reputation and you're basically speaking for the person. You're putting your words there, and so you need to probably make sure it's true. If you're going to stand up for this person, you don't want it to be in some limited capacity. The other option is what we call background, and then there's deep background. Background is the idea of you can name the person. Or somebody speaks on background. Background, usually there's sort of two kinds of background that it can occur. One is sort of where you can just say something very loosely attributing it. You can't use their name, but you can say somebody in the know, or somebody who works for the business, or a nurse at the hospital, or something like that, where you give just enough information so that people know they have the background, sort of as you talk about attribution, having the name and then the background, you give just the background. And in that case, that is acceptable, but it is fairly similar to anonymous because you're not naming the person. Now, when you use background, you can do that. And, as far as background goes, you can use the information, but it's really not that much different than anything else, because you need to make sure the background is used in a way that that you don't actually identify the person. You can't say the secretary at such and such place when there's only one secretary, or you can't say, you know, the third grade teacher at such and such school when there's only one third grade teacher at such and such school. You know, you have to, you know, use, you know, a teacher in the district or something far enough removed that people wouldn't be able to identify it, or a person in the know, or a person who is present at the meeting, or something like that. The other thing is you could also have like maybe what's called deep background, where essentially somebody says, you know, I will confirm it, but you can't give any information. You don't have to say I'm anonymous. It's just, you know, it was confirmed by a source, something like that. The other thing is we can kind of go into off the record, on the record. On the record means you're on the record, you know everything they're saying. And once a person goes on the record, you know, once you've introduced yourself as a member of the media, you say, you know, I want to interview you, let me get your name. You ask them for their name, you ask them to spell it. They know that they're talking to media. They can't, after they've already started this conversation, say, oh, wait. I didn't want what I just said to be used. Well, you know, you had that opportunity. Don't say it if you didn't want to use it. So don't let people try to get you out of letting you use something that they gave you, because, you know, that's not the way that works. You know, if you knew you were on the record, you're on the record until you say, I'm off the record. Now, sometimes sources will say, I don't really want this for publication, or can this be off the record? And as a general rule, every reporter has different rules. Some reporters say, you know, I don't want anything that's off the record. I always had a rule that, you know, if someone wanted to tell me something off the record, I would listen to it, but I would make note of the fact that I wasn't supposed to use it, or I would just not write it down and just make a mental note that I'm not supposed to use it. And the reason why is because sometimes you get information that maybe is useful and you might be able to negotiate onto the record in another way. Off the record is like you never heard it. You may be able to use it for background in the sense of, I know this is true, this person's corroborated it, but I can't use it. So, you know, you could use it to poke around for the information, but you can't ever let anybody know. You can't ask anybody about it. You can't act like you know it. You can maybe know that there's something there to look for, but you can't actually know it. And so it's a kind of a strict rule that, you know, if somebody says, well, there's documents out there. I'll tell you off the record, there are some documents out there. Now, you can't go around saying, well, somebody told me there were documents out there. Nobody told you that. It's off the record. You know, you can't say it. That would be background. If you said, well, somebody told me, that would be background. Off the record means you didn't hear it. Now, you could go around and say, hey, I'm just looking to see if there's any documents about this, because you know it, but you can't say how you know that, or just, you know, you're just kind of curious, that kind of thing. But you can't actually let anybody know that you know that somebody told you that. So the reason why off the record is sometimes valuable is it can indicate something that you can pursue, tells you part of the story you don't know that you can help fill in the gaps later. The other thing is sometimes people will tell you it, and then once they're a little more comfortable and you've had a few more conversations, you can negotiate that information onto the record and attribute it to them. Just as a really basic example of this, you know, it was kind of, I mean, this is so not of that much significance, but one year I was working, and there was a early frost, and a lot of the orange crop in Florida was damaged, and there weren't going to be nearly as many oranges. Oranges were going to shoot up in price. And a lot of bands, at least used to would sell boxes of citrus fruit as a fundraiser. And so one of the groups that was going to be doing that was a local band. And so they were going to do a fundraiser of selling citrus, but the prices were going up like double, you know. And so a box of oranges, you know, a big box of oranges might cost, you know, $25, and this year is going to cost $50, which is a lot of money. Somebody who maybe buys a box every year to support it and have a box of oranges around in the winter would now be facing a $50 bill instead of a $25 bill. So I talked to the person who told me what the cost was going to go from, and I don't remember what the cost difference was now, in all honesty. I could probably maybe find it or whatever. And so the person said, you know, they told me, they said, well, this is off the record. I don't want anybody to know. He said, because I want my band members to be able to go out and talk to people. I don't mind doing a story about the fact prices are going up, but I want my members to be able to be the ones to tell people what the price are going to be and have that conversation. I don't want them to read in the paper and be like, no, I'm not interested right from the get-go. They don't even want to entertain the students' sales pitch. I want them to tell them what the price is and be able to give the sales pitch first. I said, okay, fair enough. I said, well, what is the price difference, you know, off the record? He tells me, and I said, okay. So I pursue and I work on the story a little bit longer. And I realized, like, you know, for me to say the price is going up is really pretty, you know, not that great. So I called the guy back and I said, you know, I've been working on this and I really feel like, you know, is there any way you'd be willing to let me use it? He said, no. I said, well, is there a way we could get around it? Do you mind if I say, I mean, you're going up this much. I said, do you mind if I say the price is going up more than 50%, or the price is going to almost double or something like that? And I think he thought about it. He said, yeah, I think I'd be okay with you saying the price is going to close to double or go up more than 50%, you know, give a percent rather than an actual dollar amount. And I said, okay, well, that at least gives some context I think our readers can use. And so I didn't get the information on the record, but I was at least able to, by knowing the information off the record, negotiate it. Now, the only person I could have had that conversation with about it, what was told me off the record, was him. I wouldn't be allowed to have that conversation with anybody else. Maybe your editor. I mean, editors are usually allowed to have that information. But by and large, you keep that information to yourself. If it's off the record, you never heard it unless you negotiate some sort of background or deep background on that information.